Well, hey everyone. Hey, I'm Shannon Keebler with Empower Consulting. We are talking tonight about math talk and specifically math talk in our math expressions lessons. Where does it fit in? And I've got 3 different tips for you tonight as far as how to get more math conversation in during your math classroom. So, a couple of thoughts. One is I just want to have common understanding about what math talk means. And I don't mean it as an event. Okay, so some of you in your districts, you've done number talks, number strings. I'm not talking about that. Number talks are a thing that increase math conversation. So it's when we look at an image and we say, oh, I see 3 eggs and 2 eggs. So now I know there's 5 eggs. It's when we start to get conversation going around what we see, what we notice, what we wonder. With problem strings, it's about the various ways we might solve that problem using some mental math strategies. All of those are wonderful things. Some of them are included sometimes in a math expressions lesson, but that's not really what we mean when we say math talk. It is a component of math talk, but in case of a number talk, that's an event. It's a moment in time where I had kids talk about something in terms of an equation or a picture, but I'm talking about math talk being a verb. It's what we do throughout the math block. And an adjective, we are a math talk community. We're going to do things like problem strings and number talks inside of that math talk, but I want you to start to wrap your head around how can I have student voice be more prominent in my math classroom? Okay, so as we're thinking about what the purpose of math talk is and how can I just easily do a couple of things right now, as kids are getting super antsy, it's springtime, you might be right after spring break, right about going into spring break. We know this is when all of our norms and routines become even more important because kids need different strategies to stay engaged. So I want you to think about how math talk is not a I'll focus on that next year thing. It's a maybe this could help save us this year. How can we shake things up and get kids back engaged in some math content? And one of those ways is through math discourse. So we're going to talk about these 3 methods tonight, some easy ways that you can do this without having extra materials or extra things to do. The first one is I want you to think about the difference between open-ended and closed questions. So one of the ways that we increase math discourse easily is through open questions. And believe it or not, there's also room for close. So let's start with open. An open question is any question you're already asking that cannot be answered in one word that everyone agrees. So something like, what's 5 plus 3? Kids would say 8. Now, you might get some wrong answers, but there is a right answer. Okay, the answer is 8, even if you hear other incorrect answers, but there's not much to discuss there. Like, it's 8. That is a closed question. An open question has room for multiple methods, multiple strategies, other ways to think about it, other ways to say it. So we might say, so what is the meaning of the denominator in this fraction? Well, there are actually lots of things that we could say about the meaning of the denominator. Maybe it's the number of slices that were in the entire pie. It's the number of parts in the whole. It's right. So there's ways that we can describe what that denominator means. That's not going to be like a one-word answer or something that everyone's going to say it the same way. That's an open question. An open question is something where there's lots more that we could say about that. There's other points of view, there's multiple strategies, there's multiple methods. Open question. Okay. If it's an open question though, here's your quick fix. It automatically calls for partner talk. So although you might like to pull sticks out of a hat, okay, or out of a jar of like, I ask a question, I pull a stick, Johnny, okay, I want to give students an ability to formulate their thoughts, to have some think time, to rehearse their thinking before I call on a stick. Now, calling on a stick is supposedly an engagement strategy. Okay, I get that. But in the math classroom, it can also be pretty anxiety producing in terms of I'm scared to death she's going to call my name or pull my stick because I do not have a clue how to answer this question. So instead, every time or most of the time that I ask a open question, I'm going to turn it into a turn and talk. Okay, we are going to have partner conversation. So I say to them, so what is the denominator meaning right now in this problem? I want you to not only draw a picture, I want you to explain with your neighbor, how would you defend what the denominator means? And I want you to come up with 2 different ways to explain it. Everyone ready? And then I'm going to throw them into partnerships. Now, If you've seen me teach before, you know that I'm going to name those partners. So I'm going to say something like, your peanut butter, your jelly, your Mario, your Luigi. And I'm going to say very clearly, Mario, you're going to start. You're going to defend with one way to describe that denominator. Luigi's, I want you to repeat, or I want you to come up with a second way. Okay, I'm going to give both partners a job so that we don't have steamrollers, dominators, and we have kids that like off into like La La Land, right? But I need them to rehearse their thinking. So I'm going to give them a structure for that. I'm going to give them roles and give them very clear directions on that. But most importantly, I'm giving them an open question. I'm giving them something that is worth talking about. And it is going to be more bang for your buck if you include a visual. Okay. Visuals are just so much easier to include math talk when there's something to look at and something to talk about. So as I do that, notice I say, and I want you to write, and I want you to include a picture. Oh, and I want you to like, first thing I want to draw a picture of what they think this denominator is, like just going to draw this fraction. Now that we have the fraction, friends, let's turn and talk. What does the denominator mean in this problem? Now we do a turn and talk because I have something to anchor my ideas to. How many times have you been asked a question and you're like, wait, say that again? Like, what question did you just ask me? Like, what do you mean? I'm not sure. But then in the moment someone starts drawing a picture or writing it down, like, oh yeah, it means X, Y, and Z. So first, ask the open question. Second, include a visual. Third, turn it into partner talk. Now, I don't need 5 minutes for partner talk. I mean like 30 seconds. 30 seconds to maybe a minute. The longer you give them, the longer they're going to take. And I guarantee you it's not going to stay on topic. So I'm going to get this guy rolling, and kids go and match my pace. The faster I go, the faster they go. Now, there's processing time. We understand that. There's language barriers. We understand that. Okay, so I'm going to be hit or miss with how much time I give based on the type or the depth of the question. I might provide a written stem sentence frame for them. I might have that visual up for them. All of those things are going to enhance that conversation, but it all starts with an open question. So I asked this open question. Oh, it was an open question. Turn and talk. Now, from there, I'm going to call on a partnership to report out. I'm going to pull a stick from a jar. I'm going to say, just so you know, I'm calling on jellies to explain their thinking. Okay, I'm going to give them a heads up. When I give them a heads up, it starts to lower that. Like, I know what's being expected of me here. I know after I get to rehearse this thinking, she's going to pull one of those sticks out of that jar. Okay, so now you choose. You could call on a volunteer. We just know that when we ask, like, okay, who has a thought? We get like the same hands up over and over and over. And then we don't know what else to do. So we just call on the same hands. Okay, everyone else is just counting on those same hands to go up. So if they already know the same hands are going to go up, why do I need to invest in conversation? She's never going to call on me because I'm never going to raise my hand. Okay, if you're doing a hand raising calling situation, if you're doing the stick thing, right? We just temper it with, let's give some rehearsal time. So as you guys are talking and you're doing some partnerships, I'm rehearsing with individuals. I'm getting in. I'm not at my desk. I'm not at the whiteboard. I'm not just watching them turn and talk. I am actively listening into conversations. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. Are you ready to share that? Okay, let's practice. And I might have them rehearse it again. I might call on a student who's really vulnerable in language and math proficiency and whatever. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to call on you to explain this to the whole class. Are you ready for that? And usually they're like, no. I'm like, let's practice. So I'm going to say, so what does the denominator mean? What would you say? Because I just heard you say it to your partner, or what did your partner just say? And they can repeat what their partner said. It doesn't need to be a new novel idea. You're just repeating that. We'll rehearse it for just a moment. I pull the whole class back together. Oh, who thinks they can tell me what the denominator is, right? And I'm like, strategically, Edward, okay, right? And Edward is like, well, it means, but I prompted him for it. I prepared him for it. I gave him rehearsal time for it. No one else needs to know that because they're all actively engaged in rehearsing the idea also with their partner. Open questions. That led us to including visuals. That led us to having partner talk. There's your 3 things right there. But of course, I can't stop with that, so I'm going to give you another thing. Okay, let's go to closed. A closed question can still increase math discourse when used correctly. So remember, a closed question is when you just need to keep that momentum going. Like you're like, okay, so now we're going to add up what? And everyone's like, all the angles. Or what? So what was the partner of 5, 4, and 1, right? It's something where we're all going to say basically the same thing. There is an answer, like it's not really debatable. Okay, in that case, instead of calling on a hand, pulling a stick, I'm going to turn it into choral response. Okay, closed question, partner talk, call on someone, add on, repeat, do something more with it. Closed question, choral response first. So I say, okay, so my next step is I'm going to add up, thinking about it, and class, and I give a signal, and everyone says, all the angles. Now, I get 80% of the class to say all the angles. I've got 20% of the class saying who knows what, like the sides, the perimeter. Like, they're saying like random stuff that I'm like, whoa. Now think about the value of that. In a choral response, there's safety in numbers. No one really knows where that wrong answer came from, or maybe a couple kids around them kind of know, and they might have, have looked, but I have their direction, their emphasis or their attention back on me. So it doesn't matter. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So here's a couple of ideas I heard. I heard we should add up all the angles. I heard we should add up the sides. I heard the word perimeter. And I might write those things on the board. I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. Which one of these is it and why? Open question, turn and talk. Okay, so I had a closed question. I think we're all together. We're all going to say all angles. I say choral response. I hear all the right answers right along with all the wrong answers. It is instant formative assessment. That right there directs me. We are not all on the same page. And I don't know that they know why we're going to do this. So now I turn it into a, which one is it? Turn and talk. Now get some practice, get some new evidence. Do you have new ideas? Let's try this again. What do you think we're going to add? And now I'm in at 1, 2, 3. All angles. Johnny, why is it all angles? And now I'm going to call on someone because I've also been rehearsing who can defend why that is. And like, so why are we not adding up the sides? Remember, it is almost more important to know why it isn't the wrong answers than it is to know why this one is the right. So oftentimes we only ever discuss the right. And we're like, okay, so remember guys, we're going to add up all the angles. I'm just telling kids. Okay, I'm going to save time by not telling them. I know you're thinking, no, you're going to save time by telling them. No, I'm not. Okay, now if I'm explicitly teaching a skill, I might say we're going to add up all the angles, right? But if I say something more like, so which one is it? Because I've already taught it before, I've already been explicit about it, but now I'm trying to get them to see, but why does it have to be that and not this? They will retain more, they will understand it more deeply, they will retain it longer, excuse me, if I turn it into an open question that now they have to debate. So we're talking about the one that's right, and we're talking about the one that's not right. So open question is a question that is good for there's lots of different ways we could explain it. Okay, I include a visual, I turn into a partner talk. Closed question, choral response, so I get all the feedback at once. Now I turn it into a closed question to make sure that we understand why that's happening. Or every now and then I'm gonna say, nope, guys, we're adding all the angles, because we've talked about this like 100 times. I'm like, at this point, I just got like, friends, we're just adding all the angles. I'm gonna say, we're adding all the angles, friends, what are we doing? I'm gonna make everyone say it again correctly. Because if I still keep hearing the wrong answer, I'm like, we're still not there. How many times do you call on a kid? Do you pull a stick? And that kid tells you exactly what you want to hear. And you're like, right, we're adding up all the angles. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, and that kid was with you, but because he answered it right, you're like, everybody else must be with me too. No, they're not. Okay, and I know that with formative assessment. So I'm calling on everybody to say it, choral response. I hear the wrong answers. I hear the right answers. I now get to make an instructional decision about how much of each of those did I get and how much do I have to defend, to explicitly teach, or put back on them to rehearse again until they get the right answer and then quickly bring it to a consensus. All right, my friends. So I gave you really quick 3 plus a bonus. Okay, we talked about open questions, providing the visual. There's so much more to say when there's something to look at. Our words are really difficult, right? We have ELs that are trying to figure out what word you're even saying. When I have a visual, they can tack on. We have kids that don't know where you're even like talking about, like they're thinking an array. I had a little boy once draw an actual, like a stick figure, like running away, because he thought that's what I kept saying when I said draw an array. Okay, that's where my vocabulary doesn't match. A visual is really important. And then turning it into partner talk, get kids rehearsal time. Okay, those are your 3 strategies. And then your 4th and final strategy is, so what if it's a closed question? If it's a closed question, choral response first, then decide if you need to call on individuals, turn it into a closed or an open question, and now call out for partner talk. Okay, you decide instructionally from there. But now you actually have a much better sense of the types of answers that are out there versus the one kid that happened to say it right. And now we just keep moving when we really don't have the majority of the class with us. Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm so glad that you were here. Let me know how these strategies go for you and for your teachers. Anyone else who joins, I'd love to hear you in the comments. And